Hi everyone, my name is Ash Rao, Product Manager for the Aerosol Disposable Patient Circuit, what I'm going to be referring to as the ADPC. Just want to say thank you for taking the time to watch this in-service video, and I hope you get some benefits out of it. So let's get started. So the first thing you want to know is that the ADPC is going to come in two specific product SKUs. You're going to have your low flow SKU, which is intended for your neonatal and NICU populations, and that's going to go from 1 to 8 liters per minute. Then you're going to have your high flow SKU, which is more intended for your pediatric and adult patient populations. And this circuit's going to go from 5 to 40 liters per minute. Both circuits are single patient use up to 30 days. So when you take the ADPC out of the bag, you're going to notice two things. The first being is that you're going to receive an instructions for use, two-sided. Please take some time to read through this instructions for use before you get started with setting up your ADPC. When you tear the perforation on the ADPC and take it out of the bag, you're going to notice a few things. The first is that it's going to come fully pre-assembled for you, so you don't need to put any specific components onto the disposable. You're going to see that your vapor transfer cartridge is going to come pre-assembled onto the circuit. Your delivery tube is going to come pre-assembled onto the circuit. And then there's a few additional components that we've added onto the circuit. The first being a condensate collection bottle, and the last piece being a aerosol medication chamber. We'll get more into these components later on throughout the in-service. So the first thing you're going to do when you do set up your circuit, just like your typical standard high flow or low flow circuit, is that you're going to need to prime this for about 90 seconds. If you're using regular water, and if you're using a hard water bottle, it's going to be about 180 seconds. So the first thing we're going to do is applying, your appropriate cleaning methods. You're going to wipe down the top of the spike tube. You're going to get your water bag. You're going to screw on the water bag to the spike tube and hook that up to your roll stand. And what you're going to do is you're going to see the two blue ridges inside the precision flow door, and you're going to slide the ADPC behind them. And it's important to make sure that as you slide down that your circuit's fully installed into the unit itself. Now what we're going to do is make sure that the clip is open so we can allow for priming or water circulation throughout the circuit. And as I mentioned, you need to do this for about 90 seconds. All right. And the next thing we're going to do, now that our circuit's been primed, is we're going to adjust the appropriate settings of what we want our unit to be. So what we're going to do is for the purposes of this in-service video, we're going to adjust the temperature to 37, our flow rate to about 15. You're going to hold the run standby button and press it, and we're going to get the unit up and running. Alrighty, so what we've done so far is we've taken the ADPC out of its packaging. We noticed that it's fully pre-assembled with the vapor transfer cartridge, delivery tube, medication chamber, and condensate bottle already pre-installed onto the circuit. Then what we did is we primed the circuit for 90 seconds to allow that water to circulate in the circuit before beginning to start the unit. And then next what we did is we set our parameters and we allowed the unit to heat up to 37. So as of right now, what the circuit's doing is it's delivering HV&I therapy no different than your standard low flow or high flow circuit. The next steps we want to do, however, is introduce an aerosol medication in line with our system. So how we're going to do that? When the white flag is first installed into the circuit, what you're going to need to do is quickly pause therapy by holding the run standby button. You're going to remove this little white flag and you're going to permanently discard it in the trash or wherever it may be. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to install your vibrating mesh nebulizer. In this example, we use the Aerosol Solo. And you're going to install that into the circuit. And then you can actually start therapy right then and there. So at this point, we still haven't introduced any sort of aerosolized medication. All we've done is we've removed the white flag and installed the Aerosol Solo. One thing to keep in mind is if you do know your patient's going to be put on aerosolized medication prior to getting the circuit started up, what you may want to do is install the Aerosol Solo or your appropriate vibrating mesh nebulizer into the circuit prior to having it installed inside the unit. So the next piece we're going to do is we are going to initiate aerosol medication therapy. So what you would need to do for this is you're going to install your controller cabling into the vibrating mesh nebulizer as such. If you're doing continuous nebulization, so longer durations of aerosol treatment, what you're going to need is your continuous syringe tubing, your syringe, and this is going to be hooked up to some sort of syringe pump. All you would need to do for this is unscrew the tethered plug or uncap the tethered plug, screw on the syringe pump tubing, connect this to your appropriate syringe pump, and then make sure that you properly turn on the vibrating mesh nebulizer controller. More times than not, you'll see clinicians will keep the door open to ensure the aerosol medication is being delivered and it's nebulizing. But for those of you who decide to keep the precision flow door closed during treatments, all you'll need to specifically do is make sure you wrap both the controller and the syringe tubing between these little white ridges on the precision flow unit, and you're going to be able to close the door. One thing to keep in mind is you want to ensure that this controller is not getting pinched and the syringe pump tubing is also not getting pinched. If that happens, then you're no longer delivering aerosol medication through our system. So the next piece of this is, we ran our therapy as is without introducing aerosol medication, so just HB&I therapy as is. Then what we did is we paused the unit to introduce the vibrating mesh nebulizer into the circuit. We installed the controller and the syringe pump tubing into the circuit. We turned on our controller, and currently we're delivering aerosol medication in line through our system. The next piece of this, and what you'll need to do and keep an eye on, is your condensate collection. So what we did to mitigate condensate and condensate management is this condensate bottle that I mentioned earlier. So what you're going to do is, if you need to empty out the condensate bottle, you won't need to pause therapy. So you can keep your device running, keep providing your therapy to your patient. All you'll need to do is, you see this white clip, you're going to simply clip it. You're going to unscrew the condensate collection bottle. You're going to empty this into your appropriate disinfection or waste removal location. Then you're going to screw it back on. Ensure it's properly sealed. Make sure you unclip the condensate tubing clip, and you're good to go. So a few things to keep in mind is there's two little symbols that are going to be on your condensate bottle. The first one on the top is for making sure that you're emptying out this bottle at least once every 24 hours. And the other piece of this is to make sure that you don't fill up the bottle with any sort of liquid. So this should only be emptied, and it should be emptied at least once every 24 hours. So now, let's say our patient is done needing to receive aerosol medication, but they still need to receive therapy. At that point, all you would need to do is you need to make sure you turn off your controller, disconnect your controller wiring and your syringe pump tubing. Make sure you close off the vibrating mesh nebulizer with the tethered plug. Remove the appropriate connections. And as you can see, we didn't need to pause therapy after we removed the aerosol medication. If you do decide to introduce more aerosol medication into the system, let's say if you're doing an intermittent treatment, all you need to do is open this tethered plug, add in some sort of ampule of liquid medication into this, or connect your syringe pump tubing back into the device, but you no longer need to pause therapy once the vibrating mesh nebulizer is already installed into the circuit. Last but not least, it's important for you to know that once the vibrating mesh nebulizer is installed into the circuit, it does not need to get removed once it's already been installed. So it's going to remain as the new plug or the new block for the circuit for the remainder of that circuit's useful life. Last but not least, you're going to need to pause therapy. So you're going to hold the run standby button and your device is going to turn off. So a quick little recap for you. What we did is we took the ADPC out of the packaging. We saw that it was pre-assembled, ready to go right out of the bag with the white flag already installed onto the circuit. Next, what we did is we took the circuit and we allowed it to prime for about 90 seconds. And we set our parameters to about 15 liters per minute, 37 C and 21% FiO2. And we ramped that temperature up to 37 before initiating any sort of therapy. At that point, once we reached 37 C, what we did is we introduced aerosol medication into the system. What we had to do for that is we had to remove the white flag that was pre-installed on the circuit. We installed the vibrating mesh nebulizer into the circuit and we restarted therapy. Next, we had to install the appropriate controller wiring and the syringe tubing to the circuit. And if we do decide to close the precision flow door, all you need to do is make sure that the wiring is not pinched, the tubing is not pinched, and they're getting wrapped in between these two raised white ridges on the precision flow unit. Next, we talked about emptying out the condensate, so once every 24 hours. And lastly, we talked about discontinuing aerosol medication. So no longer needing to pause therapy when you introduce aerosol medication, when you discontinue aerosol medication, and when you empty condensate for condensate collection. So that's about it for the ADPC in-service video. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I'm looking forward to you using it.